It began on a freezing night under the stadium bleachers. Two little girls shivering beneath a damp blanket, abandoned, forgotten. Until a quiet man with calloused hands and a broken past knelt beside them and said 4 words that would change everything. "You're safe with me." What no one expected was that these same girls, once mocked and told to play piano as a joke, would soon silence an entire room with nothing but a melody, a memory, and a man who never gave up. If you're someone who believes in second chances, the quiet power of love, and the kind of music that heals more than it entertains, this story is for you. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single note of this extraordinary journey. Now let's begin. With the night, the room first learned how to listen. The wind had teeth that night. It howled through the empty stadium bleachers, rattling rusted bolts and carrying whispers of December's cruelty across the abandoned football field. Bryce Walker pulled his coat tighter around his broad shoulders, steam curling from his breath like ghostly ribbons. He was supposed to be on his way home by now, but the school's outdated security system had triggered an alert. A motion sensor tripped in the backfield. Probably a raccoon, he thought, or maybe a drunk teenager cutting through the property. Still, Bryce checked. He always checked. He swept his flashlight slowly under the bleachers, expecting nothing more than trash or a stray cat. What he didn't expect, what stopped him cold, was a flicker of movement, followed by a sharp, stifled sob. He lowered the beam. 2 small girls, maybe 7 or 8, were huddled together in a cardboard box, reinforced with duct tape and an old floral blanket. One had stringy blonde hair that clung to her cheeks. The other clutched a damp plastic bag filled with what looked like stale bread. Their clothes were thin and mismatched, their skin pale. One of them was shaking violently. Bryce dropped to his knees. Hey, easy now," he said softly, placing the flashlight down so it wouldn't blind them. He held up both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The older twin looked up. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but something deeper, something more haunting. She didn't cry. She just stared. The younger one whimpered and curled into her sister's lap. Bryce reached for the blanket. "You're freezing," he murmured. "Let me help, okay?" No answer. But when he moved gently to wrap the blanket tighter, neither girl pulled away. Bryce had seen things before. In Afghanistan, in alleyways of foreign cities, and sometimes right here in small-town America. But nothing unsettled him quite like the quiet of those 2 children. Not their poverty, not the cold. But that silence, that soul-deep resignation was what pierced him. He scooped the younger girl up, then the older. They were light. Too light. The scent of damp cardboard and mildew clung to them. He didn't wait. The drive home was wordless. Bryce glanced at them in the rearview mirror. The older one stared out the window, jaw clenched. The younger had curled up on the back seat, asleep or unconscious, he couldn't tell. His home was a modest wood-frame cabin on the edge of town. It had been quiet since Emily passed. Too quiet. But now the hallway echoed with soft, uncertain footsteps, and his old flannel blanket wrapped awkwardly around 2 shivering shapes sitting at his kitchen table. Bryce heated soup on the stove, his hands working from muscle memory. He wasn't sure what he was doing. Was this even legal? Should he have called child services? But then he looked back and saw the older twin gently stroking her sister's hair, murmuring something too soft to hear, and he decided they stay tonight. He sat across from them with 3 steaming bowls. "My name's Bryce," he said. A pause. Then softly, "I'm Lily," the older one whispered. "She's Rose." The names hit him like a punch to the ribs. Emily's favorite flowers. "Are you their dad?" Lily asked after a while. Bryce looked at her. "No, sweetheart. Just someone who found you." Another pause. "Then, will you keep us a secret?" He blinked. Why would I do that? She looked down. Because he'll come back. And if he finds us, he'll take Rose. He always said he'd keep Rose and leave me. She's smaller. Easier. Bryce's fists clenched under the table. Who's he? Our mom's boyfriend, Lily said without emotion. She's gone. He didn't want us. By midnight, Rose had developed a fever. Bryce carried her into the spare room, what used to be Emily's music room, and laid her on the futon. He wet a cloth and pressed it to her forehead. She whimpered. Once, then fell into a fitful sleep. Standing in the doorway was Mrs. Ellen Mercer, his neighbor and retired nurse called in as a last resort. She needs fluids. You did the right thing calling me Bryce, she said, checking Rose's temperature again. But you need to call the authorities. I will, he said. Tomorrow. You sure about this? He looked at the child, then back at Ellen. I don't know anything about raising girls, but I know what it means to be left behind. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You've always had a good heart. Let it do the work. That night, after the house finally went still, Bryce stood in front of Emily's old upright piano. He hadn't touched it since she died. The keys were dusty, a few yellowed with age. He lifted the fallboard, placed his hand on middle C, and left it there. The silence between the notes was louder than ever. Behind him, Lily's voice came quiet as snowfall. Did she play? Bryce turned. All the time, he said. She said the piano listened better than people ever could. Lily nodded. Maybe Rose and I could learn. If we can stay. Bryce's throat tightened. His voice cracked. We'll figure it out. And in that still brittle silence, something shifted. The house so long dead and echoing held its breath and listened. It snowed again the next morning. Flakes danced across the window panes like quiet witnesses, frosting the edges of the world beyond Bryce's cabin. Inside, the heat clicked steadily through old vents, wrapping the house in an uneven warmth that did little to hide the chill in the air or in the hearts of its three newest occupants. Bryce stirred oatmeal on the stove with the care of a man handling something far more fragile. His back ached from the night spent on the armchair by the futon checking Rose's fever every hour. It had gone down slightly. Enough for now. Behind him, the floor creaked. Lily stood in the doorway, barefoot hair matted into sleep-borne tangles. She looked older than 8 today, as if she'd lived too many mornings for a child. She's still sleeping, she said. Her voice was flat. Bryce turned. She'll feel better soon, I promise. Lily shrugged. She didn't believe in promises. The kitchen was awkward. Too many silences trying to fill too small a space. Bryce poured oatmeal into 3 mismatched bowls and set them on the table. I don't have sugar, he admitted. But there's a little cinnamon. Lily nodded and took a bite. She chewed without expression. Bryce watched her. I can call someone today, he said. There are good people who help in situations like this. We just need to talk through what no. It was sharp, immediate. I'm not leaving, Rose Lily added, voice lower. And we're not going back. Bryce leaned back. He wasn't sure if what he felt was frustration or admiration. You do that for her, he asked. Lily stared at him like he was slow. Of course. It struck him Lily hadn't had the luxury of being the little sister, of being afraid, of being rescued. She was the kind of child life had forced into armor. You remind me of someone, Bryce said. Who my wife. Emily. She used to protect everyone, even me. Lily's eyes softened for the first time. Was she the one who played the piano? Bryce blinked. Yeah. How'd you know she left it open? The room with the music stand and the picture on the shelf. That's her right, he nodded. She looked kind, Lily added. She was. There was a beat of silence. Did you love her? Lily asked. Bryce didn't answer right away. "I still do," he said, "even though she's gone." Later that morning, while Bryce chopped wood behind the house, Lily wandered through the quiet halls. The floor creaked beneath her bare feet. Every room smelled like cedar and memory. She paused at the door to the music room. It was slightly ajar. The piano stood like a sleeping giant. Its lid closed its bench, covered in a thin layer of dust. Framed photos lined the walls. Emily at recitals, teaching music at a community center, her eyes bright with something that still lingered in the room. Lily stepped inside. She reached toward the keys, then pulled back. Her hands were dirty. She wiped them on her sweater and tried again. The first note she pressed was dull and soft, out of tune. But it wasn't silent. She pressed another. Then 2 at once. Then 3. The sounds weren't right, but they were something. Rose had always loved sound. Even as babies, she'd hum before she could talk. Their mother used to say Rose didn't speak in words, she spoke in rhythm. Maybe that's why Lily wanted to understand the piano. Not to become a musician, but because somewhere beneath the cracked varnish and the sticky keys, there might be a way to speak to her sister again, to tell her it would be okay, even when the words wouldn't come. Bryce watched from the hallway. He hadn't meant to interrupt. But when he saw Lily perched on the edge of the bench, her back straight, her fingers hovering like birds over the keys, he felt something stir in him that hadn't moved in years. He cleared his throat softly. Lily jumped. "Sorry," she said quickly, sliding off the bench. "I didn't touch anything." "It's okay," Bryce interrupted. She would have wanted someone to play it. Lily bit her lip. "It doesn't sound right." "No," he said. "It's out of tune. Been that way for years." He stepped into the room, ran his fingers gently over the lid. "But maybe it's just waiting," he said. For what she asked, for someone to listen. That evening, Rose finally sat up on her own. Her cheeks were still flushed, her movements slow, but she smiled when she saw Lily and reached out with both arms. Lily dropped everything and climbed into bed beside her. They lay there, tangled together, like roots, whispering the way only twins could. Bryce brought them dinner on a tray and left them alone. He stood in the kitchen afterward, staring at the piano through the narrow hallway. It still didn't sound right, but maybe if he tried he could fix it. Not just for Emily, not just for the past, but for the music that hadn't yet been written for the lives still finding their melody. That night, long after the girls fell asleep, Bryce sat down at the piano for the first time in years. His fingers trembled as they touched the keys. The first note squeaked, the second wobbled, the third was a soft echo of what once was. But by the 10th, a sound emerged, not perfect, not pure, but honest. In the silence that followed, he imagined Emily standing behind him smiling. And in the room down the hall, a child stirred in her sleep, as if she could hear a story being told through the walls, one she hadn't yet learned to believe in. Yet, the cold lingered longer that year. It settled into the wood of the house, into the fibers of blankets, and behind the old window frames Bryce hadn't gotten around to fixing. He'd meant to. Emily had wanted him to do it before winter, but then the diagnosis had come, and everything else had fallen away. Now, years later, he found himself sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by tools he hadn't touched since his military days, a piano action diagram printed from the internet, and a half-disassembled keyboard with sticky keys and stubborn springs. Bryce Walker didn't know how to be a father. He didn't know how to fix a piano either, but he knew how to try. Lily watched from the hallway. She never said much in the mornings. She preferred to observe, as if waiting to see if kindness was consistent or just another passing storm. Rose, still weak from her fever, leaned against the doorframe beside her thumb, tucked in her mouth, eyes big and curious. "Why are you taking it apart?" Lily finally asked. Bryce glanced over his shoulder. His flannel shirt was streaked with dust, his hair tousled from an early start. "Because the middle C sticks like a rusty doorknob," he replied. "And because your fingers deserve better." Rose giggled. It was the first sound Bryce had heard from her that wasn't a cough or a cry. It filled the room like sunshine through a frosted pane. Lily hesitated. "You don't have to do all this." He turned a screwdriver still in hand. "Neither did you. But you did it anyway. You took care of her." Lily dropped her gaze. Bryce softened his voice. "Sometimes not knowing how is the first step. You just have to be willing to learn." That afternoon, Bryce drove to the local thrift shop and bought 2 beginner piano books for children, a metronome, and a stack of blank sheet music. The cashier, an older woman with reading glasses and a scarf wrapped 3 times around her neck, raised an eyebrow. "For someone special?" she asked. Bryce nodded. "For 2 someones." Back at home, he cleared out Emily's old teaching closet. It still smelled faintly of lavender and printer ink. Inside were flashcards, chalkboards, even a miniature music stand she used for students too short to reach the big one. He carried it all into the living room. Rose clapped when she saw the books. Lily didn't, but her eyes sparkled just enough for Bryce to know he was on the right path. The first lesson was a mess. Bryce tried to remember how Emily had taught how she used games and rhythm claps and little songs to make the notes feel like stories. But his claps were too slow, his rhythm all wrong, and Rose kept pressing random keys just to hear the funny sounds. Lily sat stiffly, brows furrowed, hands clenched. After 15 minutes, she stood up. "This is stupid," she muttered. Bryce blinked. "Hey, you don't know what you're doing," she snapped, eyes sharp. "You're not a teacher. You're not our dad. You're just some guy with a broken house and a broken piano and a wife who—" She stopped mid-sentence, her breath catching. The room went silent. Bryce didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He just stood there and said with a steadiness that surprised even himself, "You're right. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be what you need." Lily looked at him defiant and trembling, but he continued, "I do know how to show up. And if that's not enough today, that's okay. I'll still be here tomorrow." Lily turned away. Rose stared up at her sister, confused and quiet. The next day, Lily returned to the piano on her own. She didn't say sorry. Bryce didn't ask her to. Instead, he sat beside her, slowly pushing the sheet music toward her, like a peace offering. "Middle C," he said. She pressed the key. It no longer stuck. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. As days passed, so did the cold. The fire crackled brighter, laughter came more often, and the piano, though still imperfect, began to sound less like an old machine and more like a heartbeat. Bryce rearranged his schedule at the school to be home more. He let Ellen Mercer teach him how to make chicken noodle soup from scratch. He cleared space in the hall closet for the girls' coats. He repaired a loose step on the porch. He learned. Every evening after dinner, they sat at the piano. Bryce would read from the books, while Lily practiced scales, and Rose made up her own songs, using only the black keys. One night, Lily asked, "Did Emily ever write music?" Bryce nodded. Always. She had a notebook full of half-finished songs. Said music was the only place she could leave things unfinished and not feel guilty. Lily was quiet for a moment. "Can I see it?" Bryce hesitated, then went to the bookshelf and pulled down a worn, leather-bound journal. He handed it to her. Lily opened it reverently. The pages were filled with elegant scrawls, melodies that danced, trailed off, sometimes paused mid-measure, with only a dot or a question mark. "This one doesn't have an ending," she said, pointing. Bryce looked. No, he agreed. She never finished that one. Lily tilted her head. "Can I try?" He smiled. "I think she'd like that." That night, Bryce sat on the porch with a mug of tea. The sky was clear for once. Stars freckled across the darkness like powdered sugar on slate. From inside, he heard the soft tinkle of the piano and two girls humming off-key. It wasn't music. Not yet. But it was something far rarer. It was a beginning. Winter began to loosen its grip. The snow that had blanketed the fields turned slushy along the edges of the roads. Thin rays of sunlight found their way through the trees, revealing patches of stubborn green beneath the white. At the Walker cabin, the mailbox stood slightly ajar, stuffed with flyers and late bills. But inside the house, something rare had begun to take root. A rhythm. Each day had its own tempo. Bryce would rise, first build the fire and prepare breakfast eggs when he had them toast, when he didn't. Lily would join him silent, but present her eyes lingering longer now on the photos of Emily. Rose trailed behind hair, a tangled halo, always carrying a tune only she could hear. And every night, the piano. The three of them huddled on the bench, too small for a trio. Bryce often perched awkwardly at the edge, reading notes, while the girls tapped out melodies. It wasn't concert material, but it was theirs. One afternoon, Ellen Mercer stopped by with a basket of scones and an envelope in hand. "Found this in the staff room mailbox," she said, handing Bryce a cream-colored form stamped with the school district's seal. He opened it and frowned. Talent night. Ellen smiled. Annual tradition. It's not Carnegie Hall, but the town shows up for it. They've even got a small scholarship fund this year for standout performances. Bryce glanced at the page. A permission slip for performance sign-up. Class names. Spaces for parental signatures. I doubt the girls would want. They already did, Ellen interrupted. Lily turned it in this morning. Bryce blinked. What? She asked the music teacher to let them play. Said she wanted to honor someone special. Didn't say who. Bryce stood still, form in hand. I know it scares you, Ellen added gently. But maybe this is more than just a stage. At dinner that night, Bryce stirred his stew, while the girls chattered about a duet and the possibility of playing on the school's grand piano, something neither of them had even touched before. It has a lid that opens like a spaceship, Rose declared. I think it's called a Steinway, Lily corrected. But we won't know until we get picked. Bryce cleared his throat. I saw the form. Lily's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. You signed up without asking. I didn't think you'd say yes, she said quickly. So I figured, maybe if we showed you we were serious. He held up a hand. I'm not mad. Lily blinked. I'm proud. Surprised, but proud. Rose beamed. Lily tried not to smile, but failed. The next few weeks were a blur of rehearsals. Bryce began coming home earlier, sometimes skipping his night shifts at the school to sit with the girls as they worked through the duet. It was a simple piece. At first, a soft, lullaby-like composition with layered parts. Lily played the melody clean and deliberate. Rose provided the echo, sometimes a beat too late, but always with heart, and Bryce. He played guitar in the background, just faintly letting his chords hold the space beneath their notes like scaffolding. One night after a particularly tight run-through, Lily said, "You should play with us, on stage." Bryce looked up from his tuning. "I'm not part of the act. You're part of us." Rose nodded. "We want you there." He hesitated. The idea of stepping onto a stage again, of being seen not just as a man or a musician, but as their guardian, terrified him more than he expected. "I'll think about it," he said. But deep down, he already knew his answer. A week before the show, the school posted the lineup. Bryce walked Lily to class that morning. They passed the bulletin board near the music room, where students had crowded around the names like bees on honey. There it was, Figure 6. Lily and Rose, Walker piano duet, unfinished lullaby. Walker, Lily whispered. I filled it in, Bryce said. They needed a last name. Lily stared at it a long time. Then quietly, Thank you. As they turned to leave, Bryce noticed a few older students whispering. A smirk, a stifled laugh. The music teacher, Mr. Hallbridge, a wiry man in his 50s, with a trimmed beard and too tight bow tie, stood nearby, arms crossed. He met Bryce's eyes. Interesting choice for a performance. Let's hope they don't freeze up. Bryce forced a polite nod, but a cold unease crept in. That evening, Lily sat on the porch steps while Rose painted rocks with glitter in the yard. You okay? Bryce asked, settling beside her. She didn't look up. Some kids at school. They said we're only performing because you begged the principal. That it's some charity thing. Bryce's jaw clenched. I didn't beg anyone. Lily nodded. I know. But it still hurts. He looked at her. You don't owe anyone an explanation, Lily. Not for what you've survived. Not for what you've built. A pause. What if we mess up? Bryce smiled gently. Then you'll mess up together. And I'll be right there with you plucking wrong chords and pretending they were planned. She laughed a small, real sound. That night, they played the piece through from beginning to end. No missed notes, no stumbles. Just 3 people and 1 unfinished lullaby sung in piano and strings and in love unspoken. 3 days before the show, Bryce found something unsettling on the refrigerator. A torn flyer. Someone had written across it in bold marker, freak show actum or sisks. Don't miss the sad sisters and their balding guitar dad. He removed it before the girls could see, but inside something burned. He knew then this wasn't just a school event anymore. This was a reckoning, not just for Lily and Rose, but for him too. The morning of the performance arrived with a strange stillness. The sky was blanketed in pewter clouds, not quite storming, but heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. Inside the Walker cabin, breakfast sat untouched. The oatmeal had gone cold, the toast unbuttered. The usual chatter from Rose had gone quiet, and Lily stared at her music sheet like it had betrayed her overnight. Bryce tried to act natural. He whistled off-key while tying his boots, made a few jokes about stage lights being too hot, and melting hair, none of which landed. The girls moved through the kitchen like shadows. He didn't blame them. He remembered what it felt like to wait backstage for your name to be called the thick knot in your gut, the racing heart. But this wasn't war. This wasn't combat. This was worse. This was vulnerability. They arrived at the school an hour early. Bryce carried his guitar in a weathered case, patched with duct tape and old travel stickers. The girls carried nothing but each other, Lily holding Rose's hand so tightly it turned red. They passed through the double doors and down the main hallway, where colorful posters and construction paper stars decorated the walls. But something felt off. Too many glances, too many whispered voices. Bryce's shoulders tensed. Lily picked up on it too. She always did. The auditorium was already buzzing. Students ran in and out of the side wings. Stage lights were being tested, and folding chairs were aligned in rows like soldiers awaiting command. The room had that faint smell of new carpet, burnt wiring, and nervous sweat. Mr. Hallbridge stood at the side of the stage, clipboard in hand. When he saw them, his eyebrows lifted, not in welcome, but in faint amusement. You're early, he said. Just making sure we don't miss our charity slot, Bryce replied dryly. Hallbridge didn't answer. He pointed to the small green room behind the curtain. Warm-up's in there. You've got 5 minutes. The green room was neither green nor warm. It was a windowless space with 3 plastic chairs, a cracked mirror, and a vending machine, with nothing but expired granola bars. On the wall, someone had scribbled in black marker, "Talentless Night." Rose sat down in silence. Lily didn't. She walked to the mirror and stared at her reflection. Something was wrong. Bryce noticed it too. He followed her gaze, then saw it. Across the top of the sheet music someone had taped to the mirror, were 3 words etched in jagged black ink. "Play if you dare." Lily's hands trembled. Bryce ripped the paper down. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. No one answered. But he knew. The same group who had whispered in the hallway. The same group who had taped that cruel flyer to their fridge. They'd come early. Tampered. Left these marks like little knives in the dark. Rose's lip quivered. "Do we have to go out there?" Bryce knelt beside her. "You don't have to do anything. Not one thing. This isn't about them." Lily looked at him. "Then what's it about?" He took a breath. "It's about you. About music. About every night you sat at that piano and taught your hands to speak for your heart. It's about courage. And maybe," he smiled faintly, "maybe it's about finishing that lullaby." Silence. Then Lily turned, walked to her sister, and held out her hand. "Let's go." When the curtain rose, the auditorium hushed. Bryce stepped onto the stage. First, his guitar slung low across his chest. His boots echoed softly on the wooden floor. He took his place at the left corner, a quiet pillar. Then came Lily and Rose. The piano sat center stage, gleaming under the warm lights. It was too large for them, too polished. But the girls approached it like they'd done it 100 times before. They didn't bow. They didn't smile. They just sat down, one bench, 4 hands. The first note came like a breath. Soft. Unsure. Then the second. Then a ripple. Bryce joined in on the third bar, his guitar threads gentle as river current beneath their melody. The music was simple, an unfinished lullaby stitched together from Emily's fragments and Lily's new lines. But it held weight, because it wasn't perfect. Lily's fingers stuttered once. Rose came in a beat late, but they kept going. And what unfolded in that room was not a performance. It was a story. The story of abandonment, of cardboard shelters under frozen bleachers, of soup bowls too empty, of piano keys that didn't work, and a man who didn't know how but tried anyway. The story of how music isn't made by the perfect, it's made by the willing. The last note hovered in the air. Then silence. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Holy. No claps. No whispers. Just stillness. And then finally, a single standing ovation. From Ellen Mercer. Then another. And another. Until the room rose as one. Even Mr. Holbridge looked stunned. Backstage, the girls clutched each other in disbelief. Bryce put down his guitar, knelt beside them, and wrapped both arms around their shoulders. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The room had listened, and it had heard. That night, back at home, Lily tucked a folded piece of paper into Emily's old notebook. It was the completed version of the lullaby, handwritten in small, neat lines. On the corner, she wrote, "We finished it for you." And under it, in a child's careful scrawl, Lily, Rose, and Dad. The applause had long since faded, but its echo clung to the walls of Bryce's small cabin like the scent of firewood, warm, lingering, impossible to ignore. It was the morning after talent night, and everything felt still, not silent. Bryce had come to understand the difference. Silence was what filled a house after grief. Stillness was peace earned tentative and alive. Rose hummed quietly to herself while pouring cereal, tapping her spoon in rhythm against the bowl. Lily sat by the window, clutching a folded piece of paper, an envelope from the school marked "Confidential." Bryce stirred coffee at the stove, pretending not to glance over every 3 seconds. "Are you going to open it?" he asked eventually. Lily didn't answer right away. Then with a quiet inhale, she tore it open. Her eyes scanned the page. She blinked once, then again, as if her brain couldn't quite catch up to the words. "Well," Bryce prompted. She turned it around. First place piano duet, Lily and Rose Walker. Below it, a handwritten note. You didn't just perform. You changed the atmosphere. Thank you for letting us hear your story. Bryce didn't speak. His throat caught. Rose clapped milk dribbling down her chin. We won, Lily smiled. It was small, but real. Bryce walked over and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. You didn't just win, he said softly. You earned something they can't measure with trophies. That weekend, neighbors stopped by with muffins, congratulations, and hesitant offers to help. Someone anonymously dropped off a gently used upright piano newer than Emily's, but not without charm. It was scratched near the bottom, as if a dog had once pawed at it. Bryce and the girls cleaned it together. Then came the local paper. The front page photo showed all three of them on stage. Lily's focused expression, Rose's small hand suspended above the keys, Bryce in the background with his guitar and unshaven jaw. The headline read, "An unfinished lullaby leaves town speechless." It should have been a turning point, and in many ways it was. But kindness, Bryce had learned, sometimes brings shadows in its wake, especially when it dares to bloom in a place where bitterness has taken root. Monday morning at school, things shifted. At first it was subtle conversations that quieted when Lily entered the room. Backpacks zipped, a little too loudly. Smirks traded just out of sight. Rose told Bryce at pickup that some girls had started mimicking her humming and calling her Little Orphan Melody. Bryce wanted to confront someone, anyone, but Lily stopped him. We've been through worse, she said, chin high. Still, Bryce watched more carefully. He parked closer to the school. He made more small talk with the secretary, and most nights he lingered longer in the music room with them just to feel the air. One Tuesday afternoon, Lily came home with red-rimmed eyes. Rose looked like she'd been holding in a secret all day. What happened? Bryce asked, his voice low and steady. Lily shook her head. Rose spoke first. Some of the older kids, they said our piano win was fake, that you paid someone. And, she hesitated, they said you're not really our dad. Bryce's hands curled into fists beneath the table. I wanted to punch them, Rose whispered. Lily sat silently, shoulders rigid, tears threatening. Bryce knelt beside her chair. You listen to me, he said gently. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. Not ever. You are mine. You're Rose's. You're your own. That's more than enough. Lily wiped her eyes. Then, after a pause, she said something that caught him off guard. Can we write another one? Another what? A song? For us, this time from scratch. They started that night. Bryce strummed guitar chords quietly as Lily picked out slow, deliberate notes. Rose scribbled lyrics in a pink notebook, most of which made no sense, but were delivered with the gravity of Shakespeare. The piece grew slowly, like a vine climbing toward sun. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. 3 weeks later, the school announced an invitation-only district showcase. Lily and Rose were on the list, but something gnawed at Bryce. He couldn't explain it. Just a sensation like a breeze through a closed window. 2 nights before the performance, he picked the girls up from practice. Rose was skipping ahead. Lily lagged behind. In the car, she was too quiet. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded too quickly. When they got home, she disappeared into her room. It was Rose again who cracked first. Lily's scared, she said over dishes. Someone at school said they're gonna mess up the showcase. Bryce dried his hands, heart sinking. Mess it up, how, I don't know. But she's worried they'll do something to the piano. The night of the showcase arrived with thick nerves and warm lights. Bryce, dressed in his only ironed shirt, tuned his guitar backstage, while the girls sat near the edge of the stage. Everything looked fine, but something didn't feel right. Bryce walked over to the piano and gently lifted the lid. It was subtle, but there it was, a sticky residue along the white keys, faintly visible under the stage lights. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and swiped. The keys squeaked. Someone had rubbed glue or soda across the mid-range. Sabotage. Bryce turned to the stage manager. "We need a second piano." The man frowned. "We only have one." Bryce glanced at the audience, hundreds waiting. The show was about to begin. Then he looked at the girls and made a decision. 5 minutes later, when they walked out, Bryce carried a portable keyboard under one arm. It wasn't glamorous. It was small, chipped and borrowed from the school's supply closet. But it worked. He set it on a chair beside him, adjusted the mic stand, and nodded to the girls. The MC introduced them as the Walker Trio. The room hushed, and they played. Lily led, calm and fierce. Rose followed, bright and sweet. Bryce's guitar weaved between them like sunlight through stained glass. The room that might have laughed listened. Because you can sabotage keys but not courage. The district showcase ended in standing applause again. But this time, the ovation came not from surprise, but from something deeper recognition. The audience didn't just applaud three musicians. They applauded a bond forged in hardship, a melody carried by faith, and a defiance that no sticky keys or whispered lies could silence. The MC, still holding the microphone, stood blinking with quiet awe as the three walkers, you people now called them, that bowed in unison. There were no flashy smiles, no showy gestures. Just Lily Rose and Bryce. Three hearts, one sound. Backstage, the applause was replaced by chaos. Students scrambling for water bottles, teachers comparing notes, organizers checking off final acts. But within it all, the walkers sat in a quiet corner with a broken folding chair and a guitar case that had just literally fallen apart. The handle snapped. One of the latches was missing. The wood inside the case splintered during Bryce's last-minute run for the keyboard. He stared down at it and chuckled. "Guess we've played our last show with this guy." Rose looked devastated. "You're not throwing it away, are you?" "Course not." Bryce said, ruffling her hair. "Some things are too worn to travel, but too full of stories to let go." Lily said nothing. She was staring at the cracked fretboard, the nicked surface polished by years of strumming. It wasn't just a guitar. It was history. That night, back home, Bryce hung the broken guitar on the wall above the upright piano. It tilted slightly to the left. Rose insisted it gave it character. Later, when the girls were asleep, Bryce sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee and an unopened envelope. It had been handed to him by one of the judges, a quiet woman with silver hair and a long wool coat, who didn't give her name, only a soft smile and a firm handshake. Inside the envelope was a typed letter. "To the Walker family. We are pleased to offer full tuition scholarships for Lily and Rose to the State Youth Music Conservatory's summer program. In addition, the family has been nominated for the Community Spotlight Grant, supporting families using art to overcome adversity. You've reminded us why music exists. With gratitude, the board." Bryce set the letter down. He should have felt triumphant, grateful. Instead, he felt stunned. He had once believed that life stopped after heartbreak, that you simply learned to walk without the missing parts. But what if the parts didn't disappear? What if they became music? In the weeks that followed, the town slowly began to shift around them. The whispers at school faded. Ellen Mercer began stopping by more often sometimes, with cookies, sometimes with sheet music, always with gentle advice. She told Bryce once with a knowing look, "You can build more than a life. You can build a legacy." And then she added softly, "If you're brave enough to let someone help you do it." The biggest surprise came one chilly Thursday evening. The sun had just dipped behind the hills when Bryce opened the front door to find a woman in a gray pantsuit and red scarf standing on his porch. "Mr. Walker?" He blinked. "That's me. Sort of." She smiled. My name is Joanna Ellis. I represent the Armitage Foundation. We fund arts education initiatives across rural communities. He raised an eyebrow. Is this about the scholarship? In part, she replied. But mostly it's about what comes next. She stepped inside, glancing at the guitar on the wall, the piano by the fireplace, the photo of Emily that still sat in a frame beside the bookshelf. I've read your story, the girl's story. The performance video was sent to our board. Mr. Walker, we'd like to help you build something. He folded his arms. Build what? A music studio. Here. For kids like Lily and Rose. For anyone who needs a place to listen and be heard. Bryce stared at her. She smiled again. Think about it. We'll be in touch. The next evening he told the girls. Lily looked skeptical. Why would they help us? Because Bryce said you helped them first. You reminded people that music isn't about stages. It's about souls. Rose tugged his sleeve. Can we name it? He grinned. You're the founders. Of course. She whispered something in Lily's ear. They both giggled. Then Lily turned serious. What about the listening room? Bryce froze. He looked at the piano, at the guitar, at Emily's photo, then nodded. Perfect. Plans came fast after that. Joanna returned with blueprints. Volunteers offered labor. Donations trickled in. It would take months, maybe a year, but it was real. Meanwhile, the girls kept playing. Sometimes at school, sometimes at the community center, sometimes just in the kitchen, while Bryce made pancakes. They began composing again, this time together. Bryce joined in, slowly learning how to shape chords that matched their emotions. One quiet afternoon, Lily found him tuning a new second-hand guitar. She sat beside him. I think you're good at this, she said softly. At what? Tuning out of key, no, she said. At being ours. He didn't speak. He just reached out and held her hand. A month later, at the town's spring arts fair, the Walkers played under an open tent beneath blooming dogwood trees. No awards, no trophies, just folding chairs and strangers-turned friends, swaying gently to the notes of a new song. The song had no title, no perfect structure, just 3 hands, 1 guitar, and a story still unfolding. And this time, there were no sabotaged keys, no broken strings, only hearts wide open, unafraid, and music that belonged to them. The foundation was poured in early May. Cement trucks rolled up the dirt driveway with more ceremony than necessary, but the girls treated the entire process like a festival. Rose wore a hard hat 2 sizes too big and danced through the gravel with her arms spread like airplane wings. Lily watched from the porch steps, quieter, but no less affected. There was something sacred about seeing an idea become earthbound. Bryce stood with a blueprint rolled under one arm, nodding along as the contractors explained load-bearing walls, insulation, and something about acoustics he didn't quite understand. What he did understand was this: the listening room was no longer just a dream. It would have a small practice stage, a baby grand piano donated by a retired pianist from Spokane, soundproofed corners, rehearsal booths, a place where kids could come after school not to impress but to express. And right in the center, mounted to the wall beneath soft lighting, would hang the old, broken guitar that had seen them through. Do you think Mom would have liked it? Lily asked that night. They were sitting on the porch, swing the wind warm for the first time all year. Bryce exhaled slowly. I think she would have lived here if she could. Lily nodded. Me too. Then more softly. Sometimes. I forget her face. Bryce turned toward her. That's okay. But I feel guilty. He looked out toward the construction site, where the frame of the new building was slowly taking shape. Want to know a secret, he asked? She nodded. Sometimes I forget my own. Lily blinked. When I lost Emily, he continued, I didn't just lose her. I lost the version of me that existed only with her. For a long time I didn't know who I was, without her laughter bouncing off these walls. Lily was silent. But then you two showed up, and bit by bit, I remembered. He put an arm around her shoulders. Love doesn't disappear, Lily. It just changes shape. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from the State Youth Music Conservatory, a formal invitation for Lily and Rose to join their year-round program. Tuition was covered. Room and board, too. Classes with renowned instructors. Performances in theaters neither girl had ever dreamed of entering. Bryce read the letter 3 times before saying anything. Then he slid it across the table. Lily stared at it. Rose tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "This is big," Lily whispered. "It is," Bryce said. "And far," Rose added. Bryce nodded. "You'd be gone most of the year. Summers, too." Lily's fingers tightened around the edge of the letter. "Do you want us to go?" she asked. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "I want you to choose the life that sings to you, not the life that waits quietly in fear. But what if we don't fit in?" Rose asked, her voice almost a whisper. Bryce smiled. "Then you play louder." The night before their answer was due, Bryce found Lily sitting at the old upright piano. She wasn't playing, just listening. To what he wasn't sure. He sat beside her without a word. After a moment, she asked, "Would it be wrong to stay?" "Why would it be?" "Because it's the kind of chance people like us don't usually get. Because we're supposed to say yes to everything that looks like escape." He let that settle between them. "You know," he said quietly. "Emily once turned down a job offer in New York. Big symphony gig. Paid more than both our salaries combined." Lily's head turned toward him. "Why," she said, "a song means nothing if it doesn't belong to a place that listens." Lily looked down at her hands. "This town listens now. It does. But it didn't. Not until you taught it how." They accepted the invitation, but with conditions. The girls would attend summer sessions only. The rest of the year they'd stay home, help build the listening room, and serve as its first mentors. The conservatory agreed. "They called you a musical anomaly," Bryce joked. Lily smirked. "Sounds contagious." Summer arrived like a hymn, warm, layered, and slow to end. The girls packed their bags with more notebooks than clothes, a box of colored pencils, and Emily's music journal now filled with their own scrawled additions. Bryce drove them to the conservatory campus, his truck grumbling the entire 3-hour journey as if voicing its protest. They hugged goodbye beneath an elm tree with golden leaves, both pretending they weren't crying. "I'll write," Lily promised. "And I'll write too," Rose echoed. Bryce knelt, pulling them both close. "You've already written more into my life than I can ever explain," he said. Back home, the cabin was quieter, but not hollow. Bryce found rhythm in the renovations, painting the listening room walls in soft, inviting colors. Moss green, sunrise, yellow piano, black. He added a sign over the doorway, hand-carved by a retired carpenter down the road, "The Room That Listened." Ellen Mercer helped organize weekend community events. Local teens trickled in curious, at first then hooked. Some came with no musical training. Some came with too many scars to speak in words. Bryce greeted them all with the same sentence. "What do you want to say?" They always found a way to answer eventually. When Lily and Rose returned in August, the listening room held its first public showcase. No awards, no judges, just families, friends, and music stitched together with real stories. The Walkers opened the night with a brand new piece, part lullaby, part waltz, part improvised joy. They played it side by side on a shared bench, with Bryce quietly joining on a new guitar, the one they'd bought together from a pawn shop, paid in full by collecting pennies in a coffee jar labeled Dad's Comeback Tour. No one spoke when the final note ended. They didn't need to. The room already knew how to listen. She came in quietly, just before the second performance. The listening room was filled wall to wall that Saturday evening. Folding chairs had been borrowed from the fire station. Neighbors brought casseroles and lemonade. Teenagers huddled in corners, with borrowed instruments and nervous eyes. In the back row, someone had placed a chair slightly off-center, as if waiting for someone who might or might not come. That's where she sat. Hair silver like polished pewter. Hat modest charcoal gray. Eyes sharp behind glasses that looked more functional than fashionable. Her presence didn't demand attention, but Bryce noticed her the moment she entered. She carried herself like someone who had once stood in front of an orchestra, and stopped doing so long ago. After the final note of Lily and Rose's duet faded into the soft hush of the room, the applause rose like tidewater. Familiar, grateful. No longer astonished, like in the early days this crowd had come to expect beauty. But it was a different kind of applause. Now warmth, not surprise. Family, not spectacle. Bryce stepped onto the stage guitar in hand and took the mic. "Before we close tonight," he said, voice steady, "I want to thank everyone who made this place possible, not just with hammers or donations, but by showing up, by listening." He paused, catching Lily's gaze in the front row. She smiled, the kind of smile that said, "We built this." But there's someone here tonight who once listened long before this room had walls. He turned slightly toward the back, toward the woman in the gray hat. "Dr. Caroline Danner," he said, "former concert pianist, music professor, and if I'm allowed to say it, one of the first people who ever believed this community could be more than silence." Heads turned, whispers stirred. The name wasn't unknown. It had been legendary in music circles decades ago. But no one had seen her in years. Caroline stood slowly. She didn't bow. She simply nodded. The room rose to its feet. After the event, Bryce found her near the back hallway sipping tea from a paper cup. "Wasn't expecting you," he said. "I didn't expect myself," she replied. Her voice was low and composed, every word weighed before release. She gestured toward the stage. "That girl, Lily, she plays like someone who's lived 2 lives." "She has," Bryce said softly. "And the younger one, Rose. Her phrasing. There's instinct there, untamed but honest." He smiled. "She plays from the inside out." Caroline nodded. "That's the only way worth playing." They stood in silence a moment longer. Then she looked up. "Do you still have her bench?" Bryce blinked. "Emily's," she nodded. "It's in the back closet." Why Caroline's lips curved ever so slightly. "Because I'd like to sit at the piano again. And I can't do it on any other bench." They brought it out the next day. The bench was worn smooth at the edges, one leg shorter by a fraction, just enough to rock gently if you didn't sit just right. Emily had always said it made her earn the balance. Caroline lowered herself onto it, like someone greeting an old friend. Bryce sat nearby, tuning his guitar. "What stopped you?" he asked quietly. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were on the keys. "My son," she said. "He died overseas. I played at his funeral. After that, I didn't touch the piano again." Bryce didn't speak. "I thought music betrayed me," she continued, "that it stopped meaning anything once he was gone." Her fingers hovered over the ivory. "But last night, I realized I was wrong." She played a single note, then another, then a phrase, simple, aching, real. Lily peeked through the doorway, Rose behind her. They said nothing. They simply listened. Over the next few weeks, Caroline became part of the listening room's rhythm. She never asked to teach. She never gave lectures or lessons. But she came every Wednesday and Sunday, always with a scarf around her neck and a folder of handwritten compositions in her bag. The students called her Maestro half-jokingly until they watched her play. Then the jokes fell away. One afternoon, she invited Lily to sit beside her. "What's this?" Lily asked, eyeing the sheet. "A duet," Caroline said, "but the second half is missing." Lily smiled. "I've done that before." They played the first half together. When it ended, Caroline paused. Lily, without asking, improvised a continuation, soft, uncertain at first, then stronger. Caroline nodded. Exactly. Meanwhile, Bryce found himself in unfamiliar territory. People asked him to speak at town halls. Schools called about music outreach programs. A radio station requested an interview. One day, a reporter from a national magazine arrived wanting to do a feature. Bryce laughed. "You sure you've got the right guy? I fix heaters and play guitar off-key." The reporter replied, "You turned a broken piano and a forgotten guitar into a movement?" Bryce thought about that all night. At one point, he wandered into the listening room long after everyone had gone. The walls glowed under soft lights. The guitar above the piano cast a long, gentle shadow. He sat at the bench. Not Emily's, not Caroline's. His. He played quietly. Slowly. The melody wasn't flawless, but it was his. Caroline left a letter on the table one morning. To Bryce, Lily, and Rose. "My time with you has given me something I thought I'd lost the courage to begin again. I've decided to open a small studio in the next town over. Teach again. Perform again. Live again. But I'll always come back here. Because this room didn't just listen. It spoke. With all my heart, Caroline." The bench stayed behind. Still slightly uneven. Still perfect in its imperfection. Like every note ever played in the listening room. By the time autumn settled across the valley, the listening room had become more than a building. It was a gathering place, a sanctuary, a soft answer to hard questions. Bryce stood on the porch one Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching a new group of students shuffle in backpacks, slung low violin cases, in tow, laughter stitched with nerves. A few months ago, many of them wouldn't have spoken above a whisper. Now, they entered like they belonged. Because they did. Inside the room buzzed with quiet energy. Ellen Mercer handed out cookies and napkins, shaped like musical notes, while a boy with a mop of red hair practiced scales on a xylophone near the window. A mother braided her daughter's hair as she waited for her turn on the piano. Over it all, the soft hum of strings being tuned, voices testing harmonies, hearts preparing to speak through melody. At the center of it all stood Lily and Rose. They weren't teachers, not officially, but the younger kids clung to them like fireflies to light. Lily, calm and patient, helped a nervous student adjust her posture at the keys. Rose giggled as she demonstrated how to tickle the high notes. Their ease was natural, unpracticed, like music itself. Bryce watched from the back, pride swelling until it hurt. He'd stopped trying to understand how two girls who arrived under a blanket in the snow now filled every room they entered with warmth. They'd earned it. They'd written it. That evening, Bryce found Lily at the piano bench alone, staring at a blank sheet of music. He stepped into the light. "Writer's block," she shrugged. "Not block, just waiting." "For what?" She smiled faintly. For the right silence. He didn't ask more. He'd learned not to. Lily had her own timing, like the hush before a downbeat. Rose burst in a minute later, cheeks flushed, holding a flyer. Dad, they picked us for what she thrust it toward him. Hope through harmony. A statewide youth showcase, selected performers from across the state. Invite only. 1 act per town. Bryce blinked. That's incredible. Rose beamed. Lily beside her simply nodded. Bryce looked at them both. "Do you want to do it?" They exchanged glances. Lily answered for both. "We want to share something new." The weeks that followed were a blur of practice and preparation. But this time, the energy was different. There was no fear, no sabotage, no proving. Only joy. Lily composed a new piece, untitled, unhurried. It began as a lullaby curled into itself like a whisper. Then gradually it unfolded, richer layered climbing toward something neither girl could name. Rose added high harmonies and delicate runs. Bryce strummed low chords beneath it all, grounding the emotion. Ellen listened to them rehearse one evening and wiped a tear. "You're not just playing notes," she said. "You're healing with them." Bryce smiled. That's the only kind of music worth sharing. The night of the statewide showcase arrived beneath a sky thick with stars. Held outdoors in an amphitheater carved into the hillside, the event drew families, strangers, musicians, and press. Rows of seats wrapped around the stage like open arms. Soft lighting spilled across the wooden boards. Backstage, Lily tightened the bow in Rose's hair. Bryce tuned his guitar for the 5th time. Their names were printed on the program simply as the Walker Family Trio. Original composition. When it was their turn, they walked onto the stage, hand in hand. The crowd stilled. No introductions, no fanfare. Lily and Rose sat at the same bench, side by side, hands poised. Bryce stood slightly behind them, guitar strapped and heart steady. And they began. The first note hung in the air like breath on glass. The second cradled it gently. Their piece built slowly, fragile as thread, steady as heartbeat. There was no rush, no climax, just a weaving. Piano. Guitar. Silence. It wasn't about being impressive. It was about being whole. The melody told their story not in words, but in the pauses between them. The room under the bleachers, the out-of-tune keys, the cracked guitar, the kitchen soup, and the music lessons by flashlight, the school assembly where no one clapped until they did. By the time the final note faded, no one moved, not even to applaud, because what they had just witnessed wasn't a performance. It was a prayer. Later, when the applause did come, standing thunderous, tear-streaked, Bryce kept his eyes on the girls. Lily bowed low, but her hands trembled slightly. Rose stood tall, clutching her sister's hand tightly. Backstage, an elderly man in a wool vest approached them. He was the director of the showcase. "You didn't just play music," he said. "You opened something." Then he looked at Bryce. "You must be very proud." Bryce's voice, thick, nodded. "I've never been prouder of anything." The man smiled. "The world needs more fathers like you." Bryce didn't respond right away. He simply glanced at the 2 girls beside him. No longer children lost in the snow, but young women who'd found their voice in the stillness. "I think," he said, "the world needs more rooms that listen." When they returned home, the town gathered for a quiet celebration. No speeches, just hugs, potluck casseroles, and music under string lights. Caroline Danner returned and joined them in a spontaneous 4-hand piano piece with Lily. At the end of the evening, Bryce raised his cup and said simply, "Some music is written in studios, some in concert halls. But the music that matters, the kind that heals, it's written in kitchens, on porches, in hearts that choose to stay open." Thank you for staying open with us. Later that night, when the girls were asleep, Bryce sat alone in the listening room. He didn't play. He just listened. To the echo of notes, to laughter still floating in the beams, to silence that was finally safe. And in that silence, he smiled, because he knew the best songs were the ones still being written. The listening room turned 3 years old on a Sunday in late spring. There was no big ceremony, no banners, balloons, or speeches, just a small sign on the door. "Come if you remember, come if you forgot, come if you're new." And they came, from around the county, from towns that barely made the map, from long highways and gravel roads. Some came with instruments on their backs, others with notebooks tucked under their arms. Some brought folding chairs. One man carried only a photo of his daughter, lost years before, but whose memory lived in the music he'd started playing again because of this place. Bryce stood by the door that morning, coffee in hand, nodding as the room filled. His beard was grayer now, his hands a little stiffer in the mornings, but his posture hadn't changed. He still carried himself like a man built from bone and purpose. Rose ran past him in a blur of curls and nervous laughter. Lily followed more slowly, a rolled-up music sheet in one hand, a composition journal tucked under the other. She had grown taller, her voice quieter, but more confident, her smile rarer, but deeper. She had been accepted into the conservatory's full-time youth program and was preparing to leave in the fall. Bryce had promised he wouldn't cry. He had not promised he wouldn't feel like it. That afternoon, they held a special showcase, not a performance exactly, but a gathering of pieces, snippets of songs written in grief, in hope, in silence. Some finished, some never meant to be. Caroline Danner returned once more, playing a sonata she had started 40 years earlier and only recently found the courage to complete. Children who once stumbled through Twinkle, Twinkle now led ensembles. A teenage boy who hadn't spoken for 6 months after his brother died stood on stage and sang. No one clapped after the songs. They just sat in it, the quiet after the sound, the kind of silence that didn't ask for applause, the kind that simply was. As dusk fell, Bryce walked outside and stood beside the new wooden sign Lily had carved herself, the listening room where songs begin. And silence has meaning. He ran his fingers over the letters. "Hey, Dad?" He turned. Lily stood in the golden light rose beside her. "Can we show you something?" Lily asked. Bryce nodded. They led him inside where the room had emptied, except for one old upright piano, the one he'd rebuilt all those years ago. Its bench still wobbled slightly, its middle C still buzzed ever so faintly, but it was theirs. Lily sat at the left, Rose on the right. Bryce didn't need asking. He pulled up a stool with his guitar. Lily handed him a sheet of music. It was titled, simply Walker's Hymn. He looked down the page. Chords, melody, no lyrics. "What is it?" he asked. Rose answered. "It's our thank you." Lily added, "To you, to Mom, to this place." And then without further prelude they began to play. The piece started with a gentle echo of the lullaby they'd first performed years ago, familiar, but matured. The chords were deeper now, the tempo slower. There were pauses, suspensions, moments of space. Bryce joined with soft harmonics on the guitar weaving in and out of their piano like thread through tapestry. Midway through the piece, Lily shifted to a minor key. Rose responded with delicate arpeggios notes that fluttered like memory before settling. Then came the unexpected. The music stopped. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just stopped. A rest. A single breathless rest that seemed to last a lifetime. Bryce held his guitar in silence. The girls did not move. And in that stillness he understood. This was the last note. Not a sound, but a pause. A letting go. The piece resumed softly, just a few bars more. A melody that lifted like dawn and resolved not in grandeur, but in grace. When they finished, no one spoke. Even the air seemed unwilling to move. Then Lily closed her eyes, placed her hands in her lap, and said quietly, "Thank you for listening." Later that night, long after the guests had gone, Bryce found himself alone in the listening room. Moonlight streamed through the window, dust motes, drifting like old dreams. He sat at the upright piano not to play, but to remember. On the wall above him, the broken guitar still hung its strings, forever stilled. Below it, Lily's last sheet music lay open. And for the first time in his life, Bryce didn't feel the need to fill the silence, because it was full of everything that had come before. Of two girls who had once trembled under stadium bleachers, of a man who didn't know how but tried anyway, of music stitched together by healing hands, of a room built not from brick or wood, but from hope. Bryce closed the lid of the piano, not in sadness, in reverence. Then he whispered into the hush. We listened. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if you'd like to hear more true to the heart stories, like this one, feel free to subscribe and join our growing circle of listeners. There's always a seat for you here. Thank you for spending your time with us today. It means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep listening.